Hi, welcome to the Danny Johnson Show. My name is Micah. Today we're on day 3 of our week of daily testimonies for Christ. Next you'll be hearing from call center rep Isaiah James.
Hello, my name is Isaiah, and originally I am from Wisconsin, and I am 21 years old. So like I said, I'm from Wisconsin, and that's where I was born and also adopted. I was born into a high school relationship. My birth mom and my birth dad were either just graduating high school or one was still in high school actually. And so, yeah, that caused obviously a lot of tension and problems in their relationship because my birth mom was the one who was trying to take care of me. But being in high school and trying to hold down a job and, you know, trying to raise a kid all at the same time just wasn't really working out. And so at the end of the day, her decision for me to give me the best life that she thought I could have would be to give me up for adoption. And I thank God for that every day, and I'm blessed massively by it because I believe that I was extremely blessed to be adopted, and by the family that I was adopted by. I was adopted into a family who already had 2 kids, my 2 sisters, older sisters who are twins, and even before them my parents had 2 foster kids that they lost. But I still remember their names and remember stories of them, even though I've never really met them. So, growing up was kind of, I mean, it was normal. My parents made being adopted normal, but whenever other people would ask, it always seemed to be like a foreign concept to them. They wouldn't really know what to call my parents. They'd be like, well, what are they? And it's like, well, they're my parents. You know, they've always been my parents. I never really went through a phase of, you're not my mom, you're not my dad. And because from as far as I could remember, they always were, so that was that. Also growing up, my dad was a pastor, and he was a pastor for a number of years, but I was, so not born into a Christian family, but adopted into a Christian family, and then growing up with my family, church was always like a regular setting for me to be at. Learning scriptures, memorizing scriptures was always like, you know, at the forefront of my mind that I must do or whatever, but diving in deeper was never really a thing until much later in life. I grew up around the church and in the church a lot, and then when I moved to Texas, we actually moved away from being pastors' kids or whatever, being a church family. My parents still go to church, and I'm still a believer, and they are all too, but they just moved away from the church setting as like a job. Which was interesting, freeing for me. I don't know about my parents, but just having that stigma of being a pastor's child and always being associated with God, but never actually knowing God was kind of interesting, and that really kind of like made the difference between like knowing who God is and like actually like following him and accepting him and his plans for you versus just like, this is a God, I know these verses, like life's great. So that was kind of the difference for me after right around like after sophomore year of high school. That's probably when I started to dive deeper into my relationship with God, just because throughout the years dealing with a whole bunch of like just normal adoption issues and also being a teenager, I was just finding myself often to be very confused, and I wasn't really sure what I should be doing in life in general, even though I was only, you know, like 17, but I was already thinking about those things and just feeling like stresses of not being enough. Difficult being a pastor's kid, kind of. Like I said, I always grew up in it, so going to church, it was always like, okay, we're at church, so like put on your happy faces, like nothing's ever wrong with us, like we don't have any problems. But then going home, there's obviously naturally problems, but churches don't really talk about that, so me having issues wasn't really like a thing.
So tell me more about your experience being a pastor's kid and growing up and feeling, well, being frustrated and confused and I guess sort of having this expectation as a pastor's kid, this performance expectation, and not really feeling the personal connection to Christianity and what that is, but it's more of just like a task or like a chore and more of just something that's expected of you.
Yeah.
Rather than something that you're connected to.
Yeah, so like I said, growing up, it was very normal for me to be in the church, and you know, there's that stigma of pastors' kids always being like the worst. That one stuck with me just because that would be me, and so I never really like went out of my way to be rebellious because my dad was a pastor. I think that was just me. But definitely that feeling of whenever we get to church or around church people, or you know, we're in my dad's work setting, like it was for me, even though it was never spoken to me and never told me that, it was just like this pressure of as soon as we walk into the church or as soon as we get somewhere, like it's just smiles on, you're a happy little kid, like there's no issues, you love everybody in your family, and everyone will know that, like, you love your family, like don't ever like talk about anything else. So that was, and I didn't even realize I was doing that until I was like much older, and I don't think my parents realized that maybe that pressure was there ever. But for me, looking back at that time, like it was like every time, like we never had any issues while in front of like the church. Like we always were this happy multicultural family who had no issues, and that just was far from the truth. I was not relating to my parents like whatsoever at all in the home, and we would constantly be fighting, and there would constantly be somebody's mad at somebody, or I was always getting into trouble, and there was always a lot of yelling. But if people came over to the house or we went out, like all of that was instantly gone. And it wasn't like my parents were like, look, we're not going to talk about this, look, nothing's happening. It was just an unsaid expectation, I guess, that game faces on, I guess, I don't know, something like that. So that was kind of pressured subconsciously for me, because I was just like, no one can ever know of any issues that you have, like always be, you know, this happy person in public, like never mix like your home life with any other life, like that's just completely separate. And so that was kind of interesting as you get older, and you're like, there are spaces, you know, in a church or with your friends to like express those issues. And for me it was like, I don't ever have issues, like I'm fine. And yeah, that catches up. Eventually that all like catches up, and you're just not able to hold it in. And so I'm lucky that I was blessed with like a space throughout high school to begin to express like feelings and emotions, and or just sharing that I've never really shared before. And so that kind of is what really re-sparked my relationship with God, was just realizing that God isn't just in a church, and God just doesn't want like your happy smiley face. Like it's okay to cry. And because to me that was like, I didn't really know what else to say to him or to be with him. If I wasn't happy, I wasn't with God, was basically my mindset for a long time. And so transitioning over the years, I feel like I've grown a lot, and I feel like I hear his voice more clearly than I ever did, or ever have really. And I've learned that God isn't in the church. Like, to experience God and to feel God, one, you don't have to always be happy, and two, you don't have to be in a physical church setting. And he's with you literally anywhere you go, and so that's been pretty freeing for me, at least.
Kind of go over and just talk about when did you like first have your real like Jesus moment of like really like connecting with Jesus, connecting with God, and like really accepting Him over your life and into your life versus like as a kid?
So yeah, growing up as a kid, accepting Jesus into my heart was kind of just like a done deal. Like I didn't do it like immediately, and I don't even remember what age I was, but I was a kid when I did it, and it was basically, you know, my sisters had just done it, and they were like super excited about it, and my family was like, yeah, everything's great, you know, they did it, yay, yay, yay. And so I didn't do it out of pressure, but I kind of just wanted to, you know, be on the club of everybody else. So I did it as well, and in my heart, I'm pretty sure I meant it. But just because you accept Jesus into your heart doesn't mean that you're actually following Him. And so once I accepted Him, there was no like, you know, that was that. I still went to church. I still went to like, what was it, Awana clubs, and I still went to like all the youth ministries as a kid and everything. And so nothing changed from when He wasn't in my heart versus when He was. It was just, now I could walk around and be like, I accepted Jesus into my heart. And so that's kind of just basically where God was. He was just in a little box and a check marked, done, and you know, there wasn't anything, I was never, you know, pushed. I was never really encouraged to read the Bible outside of church, other than just memorizing verses for the clubs to go to get the prize, to get the sticker. And so that was, looking back now, that was pretty interesting to me, that, you know, having my parents' job basically centered around the church and around God, like, I was never pushed or encouraged to do that at home. I don't say that my parents don't love God and that they weren't, you know, doing everything they could. They probably just totally wasn't even on their radar. They probably just figured, you know, he's in the church all day long. He goes to church multiple times a week from the job. He's probably already doing this, but I just wasn't. And so, yeah, I would say not until the later years of high school, junior and senior year, did I actually start to question my relationship with God and kind of start seeing like who He is. So sophomore to junior year, I believe, is when I actually started meeting my birth families. So the families that I had before I was adopted. And so opening those doors just like were great, and I have strong relationships with all of my families, either adopted or, you know, birth families. But it does put a lot of unsaid pressure, and it does open up a lot of doors to like emotional things that, you know, we could talk for quite a while. But so just when those doors were opened, it just like started to weigh on me, and like sometimes just for whatever reason just keeping me down, because I didn't know how to navigate through them and I didn't understand them, mostly because I was meeting my birth families for the first time, and not really having anybody to follow or to ask questions. So I was just basically not doing it all by myself, because my parents still supported it and they still wanted me to do it, but you know, they had never been adopted and they had never helped a child do it before, and they had never done it themselves in any capacity, and I didn't know anybody who had, well, I knew people who had done it, but like I didn't really ask them for help, mostly because I just wasn't comfortable with them, I guess. I don't know. So not to say that I did it on my own, because I did ask for help, and I'm very grateful for the answers that they did give, but just from like a family standpoint, like I was doing it on my own. And so that just caused a lot of confusion and frustration sometimes, because I'd be like, why do I feel this way all of a sudden? And so eventually, you know, the only answer was to ask for help from someone who has all the answers, and is the only one who can actually lead you through whatever it is that you're going through or feeling. For me personally, at least, I just had to start asking for help, which was more difficult than I thought it would be, and then even more difficult it was to actually like follow his plan and to let go of my plan. And that's something that I've been working on for the last like 4 or 5 years, is fully releasing my plans that I have and the plans that I want and the plan that I have in my head, and just being like, look, whatever you need me to do, whatever's gonna happen, like just let it happen and I will follow along, because I don't like losing. I don't like losing, and I don't like losing control. So yeah, it's basically what my relationship has been, and so I definitely know now that I'm much older, and I've asked a lot more questions of God, and you know, I'm not like this perfect Christian or this perfect godly person in any means, but I definitely know when he's leading my life and when he's not leading my life. When he is leading my life, I actually feel a sense of like purpose, and I know kind of what I'm doing. You know, I don't know his plan, I never know his plan, but I feel like what I'm doing is right, and I feel encouraged by him, but I definitely know when I'm not following his plan, and I'm trying to do my own, because I tend to start feeling very lost, and not having a sense of purpose, and I tend to get down on myself for everything, and I can never just be like, well, I gave it my best, you know, and that's the best that I can do. It's always like, well, you suck at everything. And it's like, you're never gonna win. And it's like, that's when I start to notice, like, is this really what I'm supposed to be doing, or is this what I want to be doing? And then, you know, prayer time. And that's when I try to get back on track with the Lord.
So how has life, or just explain to me the differences, like since really pressing in to God versus like just floating through a system. What's been the difference that you can see, like what are some fruit in your life as, like, you know, compared to like who you were or how you were before, and to how things have changed now?
That's a good question. Who I was before? Well, I was very unhappy, just with myself, and oftentimes I still am today. And like I said before, I feel no sense of purpose, and I feel very lost, and I always feel like I need to just run away somewhere. And I very much felt that way as a teenager, and even growing up. I always just wanted to go somewhere. I wanted to just get away, and I just didn't want to associate with anything. I just wanted to do my own thing and just be alone. But when I'm following, and when I know I'm following correctly, or as best as I can, because there's no correct way to follow, but he's just asking you to do your best to follow him and to let him guide you. That's when I feel that I'm not a waste of space, which often comes when I'm not following him, and often what I felt before. And so, does that answer the question?
It does, yeah.
Okay, cool.
I think most people have an idea of God as like, it's not a continuous journey, and that it's not growth. It's just like you accept Jesus into your heart, and then things are, you know.
Yeah, and that's kind of, when I did it as a kid, I was like, wow, I've reached it. I'm getting to heaven. Let's just keep living life now until, I don't know. But that's definitely not how it is for me now. It's like, of course I know who God is. Of course He's in my heart. Of course I know where I'm going after I'm dead. Like, that's never, like, the worry now. The worry, I guess, now is, what do I do when He's not guiding my life? And that's more of a worry, because just because you're going to heaven doesn't mean you're not going to go through hell on earth if you're not following Him and letting Him guide you. And so, for me, looking back at my life, He's always been there and always blessed me. And so that's like one of the main, like, that always brings me back to like knowing that He has the ultimate plan, just from being adopted into an incredible family, even though we had issues. It was a family who, you know, I was able to do almost everything that I wanted to do. If I asked for it within reason, I got it. I had incredible grandparents and cousins. We went on trips. Great, a lot of memories that are really positive surrounding like the outside of like, you know, a home life. And even at home, you know, it wasn't, you know, I had my own room, I had lots of clothes, I had lots of toys, you know, we had a big yard. So like, even from the very beginning, if I go back, I can see each blessing, and I can see how He was clearly in my life and guiding each piece, even if I wasn't thinking about it, even if I was making horrible life choices. I can still see like things still were working out in my favor, because He was still blessing me, even though I wasn't, you know, quote, truly following Him. You know, in those times I was like, yeah, Jesus is in my heart, but it's like, but your actions are showing very differently. And it's like, well, yeah, but we don't have to talk about that, right?
How has God practically developed your character?
Oh, mercy and grace and letting things go. I, like I said earlier, was a terrible little kid to my parents. We always fought. I didn't see eye to eye to them on anything. I didn't respect them, and at times I definitely didn't love them. And they were searching for help, and they were asking for help, and oftentimes their answer was, why don't you just give the kid back? Like, you don't have to keep the kid. If it's not working, you can just give them back to the agency, or, you know, get in contact with the birth mother and be like, look, it's not working, because at times it wasn't working at all. And so now I have a huge, like, mercy and grace for people, even though my heart is like, hold things against people. Like, don't let anybody, like, if they do you wrong once, they're done forever. But because of my parents, and their mercy and their grace and their love, and their ability to let things go and to still accept me, I feel like I'm pretty accepting of other people, and meeting them where they're at, or at least I try my very best to be. And so, because of those past experiences that God had me go through, I would hope that I'm a very approachable and very safe person to be around, because I want anybody around me to know that they are accepted and loved, and I'm never gonna expect them or ask them to be somebody that they either can't be at that time, or, you know, that they're not. And so I feel like my character has been developed just through knowing that, you know, everything's gonna be okay at the end of the day. It's God's plan. I don't need to try to control anything. You know, He put me wherever I am with whoever I am, whoever I'm with, you know, for a reason.
If this episode was an encouragement to you, go to DannyJohnson.com and share it with your friends now. You never know who else needs to hear it. This has been The Danny Johnson Show. Join us every weekday at 7 a.m. for more insights that will help you get to the life you've